After studying this module, you shall be able to know the role of R&D as non-price element in determination of firm behavior, outline incentive to invent under different market structures, understand the learning curve, and deliberate on different types of R&D cooperation. The neoclassical economic theory of industrial organization, popularly known as SCP paradigm, focused on the role of the price element to explain the behavior of firms in an industry, whereas it neglects the non-price factors as important determinants of market structure. Non-price variables like expenditure on product differentiation, skill, research and development, innovation, technology cooperation play an important role in industrial growth and development rather than only traditionally stressed factors like profits, investment and other price factors. In contemporary industrial economics, innovation is an important factor which determines the behavior of firms as a non-price element. The extent of innovation carried out by firms is determined by various factors including market structure. Next is market structure and innovation, learning and R&D. The complexity of the relationship between innovation and market structure stems from the large number of factors that may influence the incentives to innovate and their often opposing effects. These factors depend on the nature of intellectual property protection, characteristics of the invention, the extent of competition before and after innovation, and the dynamics of R&D. Determining the overall incentive to innovate requires answering many questions, including the following. What property rights exist to protect the invention? Is the invention protected by a patent, and if so, is the patent easy or difficult to invent around? Are there other mechanisms to protect an innovator from imitation? What is the nature of the invention? Is it a cost reducing process or a new product? Is it a minor advance or does it have the potential to disrupt the industry hierarchy? Does it complement a firm's other products? Does it require fundamentally different capabilities to make or use than currently exist in the industry? The incentive to invest in R&D increases with the monopoly profits that a firm can protect by innovating and decreases with the profits that a firm can earn if it does not innovate. Innovation incentives differ for inventions that are protected by exclusive and non-exclusive intellectual property rights (IPRs), as non-exclusive property rights imply greater post-innovation competition and lower profits from innovation. Arrow 1962 demonstrated that for process innovations that reduce marginal production cost, innovation incentives are lower for a monopoly that is protected from both product and R&D competition than for a competitive firm, provided that the innovator maintains exclusive and permanent rights to the innovation. This result does not necessarily extend to product innovations. A monopolist that is protected from both product and R&D competition could have a greater incentive than a competitive firm to invest in product innovation. Relative investment incentives in monopoly and competitive markets are, however, similar for process and product innovations protected by exclusive and permanent rights when the innovations are drastic, in the sense that they make existing products or processes obsolete. Allowing for competition in R&D can reverse Arrow's theoretical result that given permanent and exclusive intellectual property rights, incumbents who are protected from product market competition have lower incentives than competitive firms to introduce non-drastic process innovations. Under some conditions, a firm that is a dominant supplier of an existing product has an incentive to preempt rivals by investing more in R&D than the rivals will gain from the innovation. Furthermore, a firm that has a large head start in R&D could have an incentive to maintain its lead over rivals, and that incentive could be sufficient to deter innovation competition. While it is difficult to make general conclusions about R&D incentives in different market structures, the analysis does permit some broad characterizations and lessons for antitrust policy for R&D intensive industries. Economic theory supports the proposition that competition is more likely to provide greater incentives for product and process innovations if the following conditions apply. These conditions apply for investment in R&D with and without exclusive rights to inventions, although there is a stronger presumption that competition promotes investment in R&D if the inventor gains exclusive rights. Competition in the old product is intense. To the extent that competition in the old product is intense, this lowers the pre-innovation profit for a competitor that would be replaced by a new technology and increases its incentive to invest. The innovation is a major improvement. If the new product is such a major improvement relative to existing products that it will make the existing product obsolete, the competitor's lower replacement effect will give it a larger incentive to invest in R&D for the new product. Even without exclusive intellectual property protection, a competitor would have an incentive to invest in R&D for a major improvement, provided that it has a head start or some other protection from rapid imitation. The innovation does not increase the ability of the monopolist to price discriminate among consumers. A new product can be particularly valuable for a monopolist if it enables the firm to price discriminate among consumers by offering both its old and new products. If such price discrimination is not likely, the replacement effect suggests that the competitor would have a greater incentive to invest in R&D. A competitor and a monopolist would not have different abilities to price discriminate if the new product is a major improvement relative to the existing product and is protected by exclusive and effectively permanent intellectual property rights. Market conditions make preemption unlikely. The preemption incentive requires strong conditions and is unlikely to be significant if the incumbent firm faces product market competition or if there are alternative R&D paths that the incumbent firm cannot foreclose by patenting a new technology. Moreover, a head start in R&D is unlikely to preempt rivals if discovery is uncertain or if discovery does not foreclose alternative R&D paths. Empirical evidence for preemptive R&D investment by dominant firms is weak. The large body of economic theory and empirical studies on the relationship between competition and innovation fails to provide general support for the Schumpeterian hypothesis that monopoly promotes either investment in R&D or the output of innovation. The theoretical and empirical evidence also does not support a strong conclusion that competition is uniformly a stimulus to innovation. While specific industry characteristics and technological opportunities determine the equilibrium relationship between market structure and innovation, there are conditions that warrant a presumption that competition promotes innovation. Under these conditions, the theory and empirical evidence support the antitrust enforcement agency's efforts to promote innovation by challenging mergers that would harm product market competition. Next is market structure and innovation. The classical literature in industrial economics tries to answer various questions pertaining to market structure and innovations. One group argues that competitive markets are most conducive to supply a new innovation, whereas others have proved that an imperfect market presents no additional disincentive for innovation and could indeed lead to more innovation. Here we will confine ourselves to Arrow's analysis, which presents a case where incentives to invent are stronger for competitive as opposed to monopolistic industries. He considered a simple case of a process innovation in an industry with constant cost, and for simplicity, he assumes absence of uncertainty and inappropriability of the invention. Arrow further assumes that an inventor of the new process charges all firms in the competitive industry an arbitrary royalty per unit of output for the use of the invention, and in monopoly situation it is assumed that only the monopoly firm itself can invent. In a competitive industry, price equals average cost, and monopoly marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost both pre and post invention. Arrow considered the following two cases to identify the difference between incentive to invent under competitive and monopoly industries. First, drastic cost reduction innovation. Second, moderate cost reduction innovation. First, we will discuss the incentive to invent in competitive industries and how it differs from incentive in monopolized industries. In the figure, D is the linear market demand curve and halfway to market demand curve is marginal revenue curve. C is the pre-invention unit cost curve. The introduction of a drastic cost reducing innovation, process innovation, would result in decline in unit cost from C to C dash. In a competitive industry, the inventor charges firms a per unit royalty R to maximize his profits. This will result in restricting competitive industries' output to where MR is equal to C, giving maximum profits equal to area PU VC dash from a per unit royalty PC dash. Thus, the competitive industry would set price P and pay a total royalty P dash to inventor. The inventor would then be willing to invest in the invention if the cost of the invention is less than P dash. Whereas in case of monopolized industries, the monopolist set MR equal to C dash and his profits are P dash. But the incentive to invent is the difference of pre and post invention profit P dash minus P, as difference of pre and post invention profit is less than the P dash. Therefore, there is less incentive for invention in monopoly than in competition. Arrow's argument in case of drastic cost reducing technical progress proves that the inventor in the competitive situation can extract a total royalty equal to what the monopolist could gain post invention. The second case of Arrow is based on moderate cost reducing invention and presented in figure where technical progress results in decline in cost from C to C dash. In the competitive case, the inventor can set a maximum royalty C dash, since a higher royalty makes the invention not worthwhile for the competitive firms. Therefore, total royalty is equal to area CA/BC dash. The monopolized industry, in contrast to competitive industry, sets MR equal to C dash after the invention, giving profits equal to area PU/VC dash. The incentive to invent is PU/VC dash hyphen WXYC as before. The incentive to innovate is less under monopoly. As you can see in figure, demonstrates incentive to invest in moderate cost reduction. Although Arrow's analysis of the incentive to invent under monopoly and competition has been criticized by many, it presents a simplistic case of comparison of two markets when an outside innovator supplies an innovation to competitive market, whereas the monopolist provides its innovation itself. Arrow 1962 showed that for process innovations that reduce marginal production cost, innovation incentives are lower for a monopoly that is protected from both product and R&D competition than for a competitive firm, provided that the innovator maintains exclusive and permanent rights to the innovation. This result does not necessarily extend to product innovations. A monopolist that is protected from both product and R&D competition could have a greater incentive than a competitive firm to invest in product innovation. Relative investment incentives in monopoly and competitive markets are, however, similar for process and product innovations protected by exclusive and permanent rights when the innovations are drastic, in the sense that they make existing products or processes obsolete. Allowing for competition in R&D can reverse Arrow's theoretical result that given permanent and exclusive intellectual property rights, incumbents who are protected from product market competition have lower incentives than competitive firms to introduce non-drastic process innovations. Under some conditions, a firm that is a dominant supplier of an existing product has an incentive to preempt rivals by investing more in R&D than the rivals will gain from the innovation. Furthermore, a firm that has a large head start in R&D could have an incentive to maintain its lead over rivals, and that incentive could be sufficient to deter innovation competition. While it is difficult to make general conclusions about R&D incentives in different market structures, the analysis does permit some broad characterizations and lessons for antitrust policy for R&D intensive industries. Economic theory supports the proposition that competition is more likely to provide greater incentives for product and process innovations if the following conditions apply. These conditions apply for investment in R&D with and without exclusive rights to inventions, although there is a stronger presumption that competition promotes investment in R&D if the inventor gains exclusive rights. Next is learning curve and learning by doing. A learning curve is a graphical representation of the increase of learning with experience or doing things repeatedly. In 1936, Theodore Paul Wright described the effect of learning on production cost in the aircraft industry. This form in which unit cost is plotted against total production is called experience curve. Progress in skill learning commonly follows an S-shaped curve with some measure of skill on the y-axis and the number of trials on the x-axis. Progress is slow at first, and then a subject may experience a burst of learning that produces a rapid rise on the graph. As you can see, the S-shaped learning curve typical of complex learning. The economic learning of productivity and efficiency generally follows the same kinds of experience curve and has interesting secondary effects. Efficiency and productivity improvement due to research and development can be considered on the basis of the organization or industry or economy as a whole through learning processes. The general pattern of an experience curve is of first speeding up and then slowing down as the practically achievable level of methodology improvement is reached. Next is characteristics of research and development. The spending by firms R&D on development of a new product or low-cost production process is part of a strategic move to gain advantage over their rivals. The basic economics of an R&D process or inventive activity presents a special case for at least two reasons. First, a high level of uncertainty associated with the process of inventive activity, and second, because its output, the output of a successful R&D could be a blueprint of information, new product or production process, has characteristics of a public good. The problem of uncertainty arises in research and development because the output obtained from employing resources in a new research project is not known. Inevitably, therefore, there is a risk associated with inventive activity, and bearing of risk is mandatory to carry out research activity. If property rights are not defined correctly, then they may create the problem of moral hazard and free riders. The second aspect of research and development which requires attention is the product or output of inventive activity, that is information. As argued by Arrow and others, once an invention is successfully carried out, its output possesses the characteristics of public good, which creates problem for a free enterprise economy, especially non-excludability and non-rivalness or indivisibility. As far non-excludability is concerned, after the successful innovation, if property rights are not well defined, as once information is available, it can be reproduced at little or no cost. A firm may attempt to keep new product or process inventions secret, but in doing this, as Arrow argues, it may be unable to exploit at full extent. An alternative is to patent the idea or invention to establish legal property rights. It has the advantage of permitting a firm to license the use of its idea to others. Although it has this advantage that in revealing the data for patenting may encourage infringement of property rights or theft of ideas by imitators. The problem of non-rivalness of information creates a different problem for a firm as well as the economy. Non-rivalness means making information available to one person does not reduce the amount available for others. As the cost of dissemination of information is negligible, this implies a zero social opportunity cost and therefore would be socially desirable to make new ideas and inventions freely available to all. If property rights are given, resulting in restrictions of the use of new inventions by a firm, it implies a socially suboptimal utilization of the innovation. Next is Research and Development Corporation. The economic literature offers a vast number of arguments about the incentives for innovative firms to cooperate on R&D, including import of technology with other partners. More recently, an article was published on the factors determining R&D corporation, which grouped these factors into two main groups: elements related to production and absorptive capacity, and elements related to the complementary needs of external knowledge. The first group of factors concerns a firm's ability to protect and capture internal and external knowledge. Introduced the term absorptive capacity and in a later study noted the dual role of R&D as a source of new information and as a tool that makes it easier for a firm to absorb existing information. They argue that absorptive capacity increases a firm's ability to identify, assimilate and exploit knowledge from the environment. A firm with a high absorptive capacity should thus be able to access a large amount of knowledge than a firm with a lower capacity. To protect the results of their R&D activities, firms can invest in appropriation tools, and to absorb external knowledge, they can develop specific skills. Innovative firms with high absorptive capacities are more likely to cooperate in R&D with scientific bodies. Using this argument, Cassiman and Vugellers distinguished between incoming spillovers, which affect a firm's innovation rate, and appropriability, which affects a firm's ability to appropriate the returns from innovation. The second group of factors is related to the firm's lack of specific knowledge and its need for R&D cooperation with outside partners. Hedgedon finds that technological complementaries are one of the most important reasons for firms to cooperate on R&D and access to external knowledge. When an innovative firm requires external knowledge and skills to complement its internal knowledge, and when its needs cannot be satisfied via the market, its incentive to cooperate increases. When innovative firms cooperate on R&D projects, especially with public bodies, they benefit from the complementary knowledge generated by other agents and share the risk on projects and access to public grants. Next is R&D corporation and their types. Traditionally, the research and development process is instrumental to innovative behavior of firms and dynamic industries. R&D corporation on the basis of firm strategy is commonly reflected into following four major categories: in-house R&D, making itself; external R&D by, in-house R&D make, with external R&D by; in-house R&D, external R&D and R&D corporations mixed. The economic theory based empirical studies provide some insight on why firms choose in-house, external or corporation as an efficient way to organize their R&D activities. Next is import of technology. In today's dynamic world, firms have to keep pace with fast changing technology of rivals to position themselves in the intensive competitive environment. The transaction cost, coupled with uncertainty and technological complexity, encourages firms for external cooperation or import of technology rather than relying exclusively on in-house R&D. Many large firms sign contracts with foreign firms for the purchase of technical know-how and is a part of the firm's strategy to optimally mix in-house R&D with externally acquired technology. The absorptive capacity of a firm is an important precondition to successfully capitalize on externally generated knowledge, that is knowledge generated by import of technology. Now let us summarize. The traditional SP paradigm in the theory of industrial organization focused on the role of the price element in the behavior of the firm and understated the role of non-price competition, which is an important determinant of firm's behavior. The complex nature of the relationship between market structure and the incentive to invent is due to multiple factors and often their opposing effects. The incentive to invent is determined by the difference between pre and post-invention profit. The shape of the learning curve depicts the complexity of the learning process. R&D corporation is a part of firm strategy to combat its rival in an intense competitive environment. Technological advancement plays an important role in the determination of industrial performance. Therefore, expenditure on research and development for innovation and technical progress is crucial for the behavior of firms. Generally, it is perceived that firms which invest in the development of new product or production process succeed in gaining a competitive edge over their rivals.